Hello, friends. Hello, friends.
A tradition unlike any other.
Oh, my goodness. In your life, have you seen anything like that?
There it is! Adam Scott, a life changer. Mashed potato!
Here it comes.
This is the 19th Tee podcast, proudly presented by Cobra. Judy, back with you for another week. Drew, it's a very good evening to you.
Hello, I'm excited. We have a winner on the line, Marshy. It's a rare occasion. Well, it's not rare. We haven't had it for a couple of weeks, and I'm excited to have a winner on the line.
The stars have aligned that we do of a Monday evening have our winner from the previous weekend. The Gippsland Super 6 title is heading back across the ditch. I'm pleased to say that one of our Australasian brothers, and we can say that because we do all fall under the umbrella of Australasia, is the new champion of Gippsland. I speak, of course, of Kerry Mountcastle, and he's been good enough to join us. Kerry, welcome to the 19th Tee.
Thanks for having me, boys. It's nice to be able to talk on the podcast and share some of our side of things.
Now, look, Kerry, I know it's probably been an interrupted day of celebration. You had to get yourself from Gippsland down to Moona because the tour moves quickly, and as is tradition with golf, you don't get too long to celebrate your winnings. But what did last night entail? We saw the pictures from the sixth green, the final hole, your Kiwi counterparts running out, dousing you in champagne. Did the celebrations go long into the evening, or did you keep it under control?
I'm personally quite a boring guy, and I stopped drinking a few years ago. So for me, it was quite a quiet night. A couple of the boys had started drinking at about midday, so they were loose. But for me, I ended up just getting frozen because obviously I got soaked on that green, and then I had to do all of the presentation stuff outside while wet, covered in champagne, at about 7:00 in a cold Victorian evening with the breeze blowing through.
Now, we will get to the performance in a moment, Kerry, but I suppose it's nice scenes to see you and your countrymen kind of celebrate there together. How does it feel to be able to, I mean, obviously yourself break through, but have that moment shared with guys that, you're a special group together. You see you kind of move in a pack almost, and it must be nice to have that moment in a place where you can share it with some good friends. Yeah,
obviously, like, to be able to have that moment for myself is amazing. Because obviously, like, it's an individual sport. So obviously we're always out there to win. And we've all played in New Zealand, played the Pro-Am circuit over there, the Charles Tour events, and built our way up to work over to here, over to Australia. So last week we had 3 of us together, and this week we got 4 of us out of that group staying together. So, like, to be able to travel around like that with a group of mates, and in a way it kind of keeps you sane, because if you're constantly on your own week in, week out with the pressures that golf gives you, it can get pretty tough.
Now, look, obviously the focus should be on the performance across the knockouts on Sunday, but as is the novelty of this format in Gippsland, where you have the 54 holes of stroke play before going into a semi-match play environment, your biggest test maybe came on the day prior, where you had to get through the 10-man playoff, even feature on Sunday. So talk us through that. I imagine it was as nerve-wracking, if not more so, than anything you actually faced on the final day.
I was definitely more nervous on the Saturday trying to get in, which probably started, like, I shouldn't have been in that position because I was 8 under total with 3 holes to go, and then finish bogey, and then hold a 6-footer for par on my last hole to even get into the playoff. So I went from being comfortably in to standing over that putt on 9, going, "Oh shit! If I miss this, like, I'm not even in the 20. Don't have a chance of getting in the 24." So to then be in a playoff 10 for 8, you look at it and go, the odds are in my favour. Like, 2 people, or 1/5 of the people were getting knocked out. Only 2 people. Like, surely you can do that. And so, like, out of 8 people, and the nerves and everything on that hole, which is quite a tough par 3 down the hill with the wind whipping off the right, as it was getting very cold again because the sun had disappeared. you're standing there and it becomes a whole new test. And I felt a lot more nervous in and around that playoff than I did the whole Sunday.
It must have been cold if a New Zealander's saying that it's cold, because it would have been a little bit different for our friend Jake McLeod, who was in the playoff with you as well, because he's from Queensland. He would have been thinking it was Antarctic conditions down there. But in all seriousness, what does this do for you? I mean, it opens up a lot of doors in terms of what the summer now gives you, but what does this do for you in terms of your confidence, in terms of your game? I mean, because it looked like your game was in pretty good shape, just watching from afar on the TV. So what does it do for you, I guess, in terms of opening up doors, etc.?
So it obviously gets me into these two big events that I was having to focus on the mini order of merit or pre-dropping into. So it takes that stress out of this week, but also I get to play the two big ones. But the main part is the job security. Like, I can get into every event on the Aussie Tour in the next 2 years. And obviously I get a bit of money from the tournament as well. So that basically pays for my season before I even have to worry about making cuts and that kind of thing, which obviously makes things a lot more comfortable. But yeah, the main thing for me is the job security. I don't have to worry about whether I finish in the top 50 or like how many points I'm getting to try and get into these top two, or whether I have to go home to try and get into the top 5 of our order of merit to get into the New Zealand Open, that kind of thing. I can just get into the events now, and I've given myself a chance now to fight for those top 3 spots on the order of merit at the end of the year.
I guess, does it reset or realign your personal goals coming into the year? I mean, having a win, I mean, there's only 20 events on the schedule, right? So there's only 20 people who can win throughout the course of the year. And there's so many players. I mean, does it realign and reset your goals maybe for what you feel like you can achieve across the remainder of the season?
Like, I had the kind of set goal. Like, the main objective was to finish top 50 or whatever, 60 or 50, to keep my card for next season. Like, that was the first goal. And then I was just like, if it goes well, like that top 3 was like the far away goal. Like, it was my goal, but there wasn't much chance of it. But now the top 50 goals completely gone because I don't have to worry about it. And now the top 3 goals are the main focus. And that's basically all I can focus on now, because that's just the top carrot that we have for our tour.
I've got 2 questions here, Kerry, that they're probably related. The first is whether or not your mindset and the way you approach tournaments now changes as a result of that security. Because if you look at your results to date in the season, it hasn't, your T10, some very consistent golf. Now, is there any change in your mindset in the sense that clearly you playing under the pressure of looking to secure your card produces good results? If that being some good performances. So is there any change in mindset for you now with that locked up and how you approach each and every tournament moving forward?
That's a really good question. I haven't had, obviously, because I haven't played a tournament now, but I haven't had to think about that yet. I think I'll feel more comfortable because I find myself during the rounds, like, I get distracted by thinking about where I'm finishing and what I'm doing, because obviously that mini order of merit was pretty forefront in my mind because I want to try to get into the big 2. And like all of the last few events, I've hit it well until the last round at Nudgee, but I've hit the ball really well and just haven't capitalized on the greens. So those finishes where I'm finishing 44th, 46th, 34th, I'm kind of just slipping away what I'd call, they're just sloppy errors, or miss a couple of short putts or something like that, and just throwing away things, which could be from me being distracted by having to worry about those things. Whereas now that I don't have to worry about them, I can just go play golf. It obviously it matters because I want to finish at the top, and that'll still be driving me. But in a way, it doesn't. I don't have that same pressure.
And then probably off the back of that, does it affect, do you think, the way in which you'll now structure the remainder of your season? Because, I look at last year's winner of this tournament, it was Tommy Powell-Horan. He ends up finishing in that top 3 and securing his Order of Merit, and does so by playing really a large volume of events. And that seems to be the one. You look at someone like David Micheluzzi, who topped the Order of Merit again. He banked up a lot of wins, but he played almost the entire summer. So do you approach it from a volume perspective in terms of just giving yourselves the most amount of opportunities to score points in that Order of Merit? Or now with a bit of security and understanding, you can maybe give yourself a little bit of rest in between tournaments to target specific ones? Like, do you reshape your summer, or do you stick to your original plan as it started out at the beginning?
So originally it started out obviously because I had category 20. Like I was just literally get into anything I can get into. And that's just play. It was all definitely volume. With what's left in the season, there's a chance next year maybe I'll skip one event. I haven't had a full look at the schedule because I think there's 8 in a row. And then event. So if I do take a week off, it'll just be one out of that 8. But I'd probably just play through. And again, just as they've done, volume, just build up the points.
They only mentioned it about 250 times on the broadcast that you were an electrician or a licensed electrician. But they never actually provided any of the context or backstory behind it. So what I wouldn't mind is maybe if we can hear it from the direct source is how did you go from being a Sparky to winning golf tournaments? I'm intrigued to know, and I wish that they had told us a little bit more information on the broadcast rather than just telling us that you were a Sparky.
Well, I don't think any of them actually know the story either. They just heard it from when I was originally playing in my first APAC in Wellington, because that's all they talked about in that event as well. But when I was 18 or so, I wasn't that good at golf, and I just went in. I was like, I'll do an electrical trade. I don't want to go to uni because I hated school. And did that. And it was only until the end of my apprenticeship, which is 3.5 years, that I started making New Zealand teams, like playing better golf. Somehow, while I was working full time, I got better at golf. But clearly wasn't spending much time at work. But yeah. So but once I tried to play as much amateur stuff as I could, and carry on, and then sorry, I can hear the guys in the background, even through my headphones. Went back to I was playing golf, and then I actually took pretty much a year off golf because I was not in.
The boys want to come in.
Yeah.
The boys are keen.
Who are the roommates
Sounds
this
like
week,
fighting.
Kerry?
Who are the roommates, Kerry?
We have we got Kit Biddle, Reece Thomas, and Matt McLean making a hell of a racket through there. It sounds like someone just tried to break himself.
bit of friendly wrestling going on in the other room.
Was I? Yeah, sounds like.
Took the year off.
Sounds like it.
I think you said.
Electrical apprenticeship. Yeah, took a year off golf in 2020, and which happened to be COVID year because I was hating golf. I was basically turning up to golf just to get pissed afterwards, which is part of the reason why I ended up stopping drinking. And then 2021, I won the New Zealand's version of the Super Sixes event, and after that, asked the NZGA if that was good enough for me to turn pro over there, which after the next board meeting they said was all good. So the next Charleston event I was playing as a pro.
Kerry, I'm curious if I've done my research correctly. You're a Masterton junior. That's where you grew up, just outside of Wellington. Is that right?
I moved to Masterton when I was about
Okay.
13. I grew up in a place called
Okay.
Otaki, which is on the other coast. But I played pretty much all of my junior golf in the Hawke's Bay up in Napier, and this only in the school holidays. So I only played golf in the school holidays till I was about 16.
So this is kind of getting to
When,
my question here. Is that so you're growing up and people be familiar with, different parts of New Zealand, Napier, beautiful part of the world up in the Hawke's Bay, and then you move to Masterton through your kind of formative years. What's the pathway like? Because we bang a lot about the pathway here in Australia on this podcast and whether or not it's completely set up for success. But I wonder what the pathway is for a kid, growing up in Hawke's Bay, moves to Masterton, tries to get himself on the tour, jags a win, turns pro, courtesy of talking to New Zealand PGA. What's the pathway like for golfers coming through the ranks over in New Zealand?
there's I guess there's possibly a couple of paths, but because obviously you got the junior, like you can go play the individual junior tournaments, but if you're going through your region, you'll play for, say, the Hawke's Bay or Wellington junior team, and then you'll play for the senior team. And then like that's just you're representing your region. And then there's individual Charles Tour events, North Island, South Island stroke play, New Zealand stroke play. Kind of you do the individual events, and if you do well enough, you get the recognition of New Zealand golf, and you might make the junior development squad, and then build up to the academy. Because I made the academy after I won the New Zealand stroke play in 2018, so I would have been 23, which was one of the older ones in there. Quite a few of them back home seem to make it around 18ish, 16 to 18, and then they're in there for a couple of years or until they're ready. Because Daniel Hillier was there, is the main. He was the top amateur when I was there. But and then from there, it's New Zealand Golf is able, or Golf New Zealand is able to give you, well, lead you to starts in certain places. You play the Asia Pacifics, you play those kind of tournaments, and then it's not I think it's quite different to the Aussie setup where you have a centralized or more centralized system because it's easier when you've got 5 million people in one city rather than 5 million people over two islands that are massively spread out. It's quite a bit harder to get your top golfers competing against each other and practicing with each other as much.
I'm also curious in your perspective, Kerry. We have a very, probably to our detriment because it is the PGA Tour of Australasia, but we take a very narrow Australian focus. And, we've got obviously the Vic PGA this week, but then in our eyes, the biggest fortnight on the calendar in the summer with the PGA here in Queensland, followed by the Aussie Open down in Sydney. But we've got a relatively significant tournament coming up in February at Millbrook, the New Zealand Open. So for you, that must be, that is the thing I'm sure that you circle each and every year. And that's the one that means the most to you. Whilst, from a prize money perspective and an order of merit points perspective, there's a lot of prestige around the Australian PGA and Australian Open. For a guy playing in his National Open, that's clearly the one that, you've got underlined from the beginning of the summer and you're targeting, surely.
Yeah, the New Zealand Open's definitely, as a Kiwi, like the one we want to win. And I got into it this year because I finished in the top 5 of our order of merit last year. So I was able to get in that way. And I was probably going to be able to get that again this season because I was right on the edge of getting it. I would have had to go back for a couple of events after the Aussie Open to try and solidify that. But there was a good chance I still would have got into that tournament. But obviously now I don't have to worry about that. And it lets one other Kiwi get a spot in it because I'm now not counted in that top 5 because I've already got a start. But yeah, that's definitely the one on the top of the calendar. Try and get into that one as soon as I can.
And it's played in a beautiful spot. The country Millbrook's, one of the courses, I think, in the very top echelons of New Zealand golf. This is a loaded question, and Drews will start to smile here because he probably knows where I'm taking it. But I'm just curious, in your mind as a Kiwi, what's the best region for golf in the country? Because you've got some outstanding courses in terms of just in that area. You've got Millbrook, You've got the Hills, you've got Jack's Point, you've got a personal favourite of mine in Arrowtown, tucked away in there, which doesn't get as much love as it should. But you've got Carry Cliffs, you've got Cape Kidnappers, you've got Tara Eady. Like, I think it's a criminally underrated golfing region, New Zealand. And just from your perspective, as a New Zealander, what if you could go and play, basis one part of the country, where would it be?
If we're going by courses, it would have to be Queenstown. There's just so much money down there. Obviously, you can't do it year round, like it's a seasonal thing. But you can try to do it year round, but most of the courses are closed. In terms of quality of golf courses, it would have to be there. But going to every region has its own gems. Yeah, some of the country golf courses out there are actually some of my favourites. Just quirky, interesting, fun. But yeah, Queenstown's probably the best quality golf course venue.
Just finally, Kerry, and we've been very, very, very generous with your time the day after a win, which we greatly appreciate here on the 19th. So your attention now turns to the Vic PGA. Things move quickly, as we said at the top. You're at Moona for the very first time. You were mentioning before we hit the record button. What are you expecting out of this week? I mean, if you thought it was windy in Warragul, I imagine it's going to be pretty windy there in Moona. And I thought, just harking back to yesterday, the way you kind of played that 5th and 6th hole, particularly the tee shot on 6 there in trying conditions, you might have to be calling on a fair bit of that over the next week there in Moona, and what is a beautiful course, but an incredibly open one.
Yeah. Yeah, first visit to Moona today, and we actually played about 12 holes on the open course on what was a relatively calm day, and the wind has a lot to say on that golf course. But I do enjoy links golf because we've got one. I grew up not too far away from one at Pataparimi Beach Golf Club, and yeah, links golf is probably some of my favourite golf. And we do get quite a bit of wind back home, so I feel a little bit at home with that.
Wonderful, mate. Well, we wish you all the very best, not only for the week upcoming at Moona, but then particularly the fortnight after that. As you say, you kind of secured your spot there, and the two big tournaments from an Australian perspective, and we hope to see you continue what's been an incredible start to the year for you. So I really appreciate you making the time for us tonight, and we'll watch on with interest for what hopefully is a very fruitful summer to come for you, Kerry.
Thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
When it comes to footwear on the course, our friends at Cobra Puma Golf are without peer, and they've certainly taken comfort to another level with the new Alpha Cat Nitros. The Alpha Cat Nitros continue to raise the bar in spikeless golf shoe technology, creating a fashion-forward design with exceptional cushioning through its innovative nitro foam material. As worn on tour by our man David Micheluzzi, the Alpha Cat Nitros provide structure and support during both the swing and while walking, with its Alpha traction sole worthy of a wide variety of turf and weather conditions. And true to form for all Puma kicks, a unique form-striped external heel counter looks cool and wherever the shoes are worn. The Alpha Cat Nitro shoes are available in 6 different colours in the laced model and 4 colours in the disc model. So for more information on the Nitros or to take a look at these for yourself, visit www.cobragolf.com.
Well, Drew, it's what a pleasure to have Kerry Mountcastle on. I was about to say all the way from New Zealand. Originally, yes, all the way from Moona in this instance, as he joins us ahead of appearing in this week's Vic PGA. But a pleasure, as it always is, to be joined by a winner on a Monday evening. An incredibly impressive performance, not least of which getting through that 10-man playoff on the Saturday afternoon, as he said. But to knock off a number of players, Laurie Flynn included, was left in his wake before meeting Jake McLeod in the final. And the manner in which he held his nerve in those final 2 holes, particularly the tee shot on 6 that he stuffed in incredibly trying conditions. It was a really convincing victory in the end. I felt for Jake, felt for myself personally, having tipped him, but you can't begrudge Kerry Mountcastle in that situation. He did an incredible job to break through for his first victory on the PGA Tour of Australasia.
Yeah, well, and I think congratulations to you. I mean, there's 2 weeks in a row that you've got very close. You haven't got over the line, but you've got very close. No. True to form, my player missed the cut, Nick Voke, which I think was news to a lot of people, or a bit of a shock to a few people anyway. But yeah, as you said, Kerry, just really good golf from pretty much not making the cut, getting in on a massive playoff to going on to win the tournament. Very, very impressive. So yeah, some good signs for a few players, as you mentioned. But yeah, the honours to Kerry.
One thing I was remiss not to mention, he's actually coached by Dom Azzopardi, who also looks after Lucas Herbert and the other Kiwi, Momoka Kobori, who's only recently turned professional off the back of the Asia Pacific Amateur. So Dom Azzopardi doing good work there with a couple of his pupils, most recently Kerry Mountcastle getting the win. You are right, I am trending in the right direction. So last week it was a 7-way tie for second that I tipped in David Micheluzzi, as did you with Laurie Flynn.
Mm-hmm.
Now I've moved to outright second. So I'm sure people at home will be waiting with bated breath for my tip for the Vic PGA, because based on trends, I'm heading in the right direction. I just want to touch on Jake McLeod for a moment. I'll stop short of saying I'd be surprised if he doesn't win this summer, because I was thinking about this ahead of time today, and I feel like I do that a lot when someone plays well and they might finish in, the top 5 or even an outright second like Jake did. And I'll come on here on Monday night and say, geez, Drizzy looks good. I'll be surprised if he doesn't win. And to your very astute point, speaking with Kerry, there's only 20 tournaments in the year. And based on my saying he's going to win sometime this summer, we should have 43 tournaments on the schedule. So look, I'll stop short in gifting Jake a tournament. But what I will say is, T12 the week prior, and he's had a couple of performances in the build-up to Gippsland that have looked really good. It's why I tipped him. So I think it's great to have Jake McLeod back playing his best golf. His putter was on absolute fire, particularly on Sunday. He went, I think, to a third extra hole with Jared Felton, who looked incredibly good himself, probably for all money in the early parts of the day, looked the winner. To be fair, the dominant golf that he was playing, but Jake's putter that got him there in the end, and Jake's putter that really carried him the way through to the final. So if he can keep that where it is now, if not continue to improve, I think he will be a factor. That's where I'll settle. He'll be a factor moving forward, Drews, in these tournaments.
Very diplomatically put. Well said, without building yourself up and Jake up for failure as well. So well done on that. I guess, unless you've got anything else from the Gippsland event, I'm very eager to know who you're tipping for this week's Vic PGA, because, as you say, you are trending in the right direction.
Yes. Well, look, I just want to mention the third place playoff as well. Jack Carter taking the South Aussie, taking the chocolates there over the WA amateur Joseph Owen out of the Lake Carrinup Club. So Jack Carter rounding out the medal positions for Gippsland. Just before we move on, Druids, because we don't want to get mired down into the performances. It's a bit of a weird tournament, and we kind of said that. We have said that for a number of years now about this Gippsland Super 6 model, and it's difficult. Like we can't really go down the leaderboard like we traditionally would and pick out players to speak about, because Sunday is entirely different from the previous 54 holes. So this is probably the first year that I've been really tuned into that. You know, as per usual, you're ahead of the trend, or at least ahead of me on trends, and that's not unusual in this podcast. And you've been critical of it in the past, but I struggled a bit. Like the final was thrilling in the sense that it went to the 6th hole, and even watching Jake with a bit of vested interest, the way that he, overcame some difficult matches, particularly the one against Phelps in the lead up going to 3 extra holes. But outside of that natural drama, I didn't feel like I wasn't feeling a lot in that final day, and it kind of left me wondering if you're going to dip a toe in both camps, because it's not real. It's not even really match play. It's just opposing stroke play in a 2-man format, which I don't really understand either. So you can't be half pregnant, as the old saying goes. I wonder if there's not room on the PGA Tour of Australasia for a dedicated match play event. We've seen, obviously, the Dell event on the PGA Tour die a slow death this year, and it's gone. That's it now for the Dell match play on the PGA Tour. But, I mean, in a schedule, and I'm conscious that we asked them for a lot, and, they've delivered a great summer here. 18 full events. It's something to look at. Kerry's just said we play 8 weeks straight. Is it worth looking at something, whether it's Gippsland or otherwise, just to break things up a little bit and have a dedicated match play event somewhere across the summer.
Potentially worth looking at. I mean, yeah, I think it would have to replace an existing event. As you say, the schedule is starting to pack out now, and it is getting incredibly long, I guess, when you add in other events that players might be playing. But I think there's definitely scope for it because it is a great format, and I think that final round was very entertaining to watch. I say final round, the final day in terms of the match play, it was very entertaining. So, yeah, I'd be very supportive of seeing something like that, whether it replaces Gippsland or, whether it's an additional event on the schedule. It'll be interesting to see where they put that in if they do go for something like that. But I think there is appetite for it, certainly.
All right, let's take a quick look at the Vic PGA before we move on, Trudes. Andrew Martin is the defending champion here, $250,000 purse for this tournament. It is the final opportunity for the players predominantly having cut their teeth so far domestically to do so ahead of the major fortnight. We've obviously got a number of international raiders coming back as Australians and some overseas players as well. They'll fly in to Southeast Queensland if they haven't done so already in preparation for the Australian PGA kicking off the following week. But this is it, and this is a great tournament down there at Moona, a phenomenal course, trying conditions. It's going to ask a lot, Druids, I think, and don't want to say this is any sort of knock to Andrew Martin, but it takes a particular type of player. Like Andrew Martin isn't someone that features each and every week. He's not an immediate recall name that you say, someone who I think is going to be, in the top 5, top 10 every week, but he's a player that's disciplined and perfectly suited to a place like Moona. So I think you've got to think a little bit outside the box this week. I don't know if that kind of matches your thinking, but it's certainly how I've kind of viewed the field this week. And yes, form is one thing heading into this tournament, but I think it's about someone you're looking for with control over their ball. So, look, this has been difficult. I think it's going to be probably a name that we don't necessarily expect that might pop up. All things considered, though, just based on what I saw on the weekend, because there's a few people here that could have featured, but I am going to go back to the well on someone who I've picked already to win this
Interesting.
year. And that's Jared Felton. So I think Felt's, and I'm conscious of what I've just said about the need for a different format and the fact that I couldn't get too dialed in except for the final on Sunday. I think if that was 72 holes of stroke play, I think Feltz wins that going away from the field in Gippsland on Sunday, personally. And I think he just got a little unlucky as it relates to the format. So I think he's trending in the right direction. I think we've got a little bit of a preview in Warragul of the conditions, albeit we go down to Moona and they'll be dialed up even further. But I've liked the way that Feltz has played, really, probably ironically, since the Bucks party. So he's trending in the right direction for me, Feltz, and I like him here at Moona.
It's a good pick. It'd be a very popular winner as well, I would suggest, if he got the job done. I've gone for a player who has, since the WA Open, which was the first event that they have played on our tour for the season, has risen, or has risen in my book. I think has played some very good golf, and maybe hasn't cracked through that top sort of 5 or 10 marker just yet, but played very well at this tournament last year, finishing in T16. It was one of his best performances that he's actually had. Finished 9th at the Gippsland Super 6, however they worked that out, and T15 the week before up at Nudgee. I'm going with Cameron John here, a Victorian. So he's played very well at this event previously, as I said, T16. So give me Cameron John.
I can confirm that's not something you've plucked out of thin air.
No.
Which again would be more that would be more in line with how I generally tip. I can confirm for the listeners, you've been riding the Cameron John train on our message trail as well. So
yes, it was T3 in 2021.
Cameron John.
It was T3 in 2021 at this event as well. So it was held about a month later in the year. Don't know if there's any reading into the tea leaves amongst that. But yeah, he does play well at the Victorian PGA. So I'll go Cameron John, and you can have Phelps. I like both the picks this week.
We'll see where we end up next Monday evening.
Yeah.
Before we move abroad, there was another event in Australia over the weekend. One right up your alley. Some would say in your hitting zone. Given you are an enormous fan of the Champions Tour at large, it was in fact the Australian Senior Championship, which Nozza, Jason Norris, joins an illustrious list of previous winners with a pretty convincing victory in the end at the Richmond Golf Club.
Yeah, 5 shots. Made, I think I counted today, 2 bogeys in 54 holes of golf. So just absolutely flushing the ball. Beat a wonderful field. Stephen Allen, Peter Lonard, Tim Elliott, sort of rounding out the top handful of names. Peter Fowler. So some really wonderful names, and of course John Senden in at T5 as well. Yeah, it was a great tournament. Actually, sort of jumped between this one and Gippsland a little bit on KO, and had both of them on at one point. And Norrie was striking the ball very well. I was very fortunate to have a chat to him when he was over here in WA, and just a really nice, down to earth guy as well, who's been around the traps for a little while. He's a really good striker of the ball. Was in contention, I think, this year at the WA Open, maybe. Might have faded on the last day, but finishes at 14 under. The only player to finish a total gross score in the 100s with 196, and Stephen Allen next best at 5 shots back. So, yeah, at the Richmond Golf Club, that was the Nova Employment. I got no idea what they do. Australian PGA Senior Championship, 3 rounds. Jason Norris, the winner there.
Good on you, Norrie. Congratulations. And as you say, beat a handy field and joins illustrious company of past winners of that prestigious tournament on the Senior Tour here in Australasia. So once again, congratulations to Norrie. Trudes, let's go abroad. And if you'll indulge me for a moment, I want to start not somewhere we usually would start, but at the Hong Kong Open on the Asian Tour. Now, Ben Campbell, the Kiwi, continued the string of Kiwi victories. So nice weekend, both for Kerry Mountcastle, for Ben Campbell, and more broadly New Zealand golf. He gets the job done by a stroke over Cameron Smith, which is a big part of the reason why I wanted to flag this tournament. Smithy, I believe, was in a tie for the lead heading into the final 2 holes. We'll get to that in a moment, because there was a bit of controversy that played out in the final 3 holes of this tournament in Hong Kong. But Cameron Smith ends up in outright second, a shot behind Ben Campbell. Bodes really well, I think, coming into this tournament. It's one of the struggles we see with Smithy having transitioned to live is A, not necessarily consistent tournament golf, and B, not really a broadly quality field that we're seeing in play again. So we struggled last year getting an understanding and a read on his form line, and he comes in and wins the tournament, the Australian PGA, ironically. So I think this bodes even better. An outright second performance in Hong Kong, good course, decent field, flies into Southeast Queensland to defend. Talking to someone, with a bit of knowledge of his situation during the week, I actually think that his eyes will be on the Australian Open, because he's too good a player and too familiar with Royal Queensland not to figure in contention again. But on reflection, Drews, last year, the feeling probably was that, and he was well within his rights to do so, but he certainly enjoyed the victory of the Australian PGA last year, and probably didn't perform to his potential or to his goals at the Australian Open as a result of that. So I get the sense that, yes, he's performed well at Hong Kong, loves to perform in front of family and friends, will certainly be interested in defending his title at Royal Queensland. But don't be surprised at all if everything for Cameron Smith coming home is geared towards the Australian Open the following week in Sydney.
Yeah, well, I think both of those events have probably gone up in stature for him, maybe now that he's not, week to week on the PGA Tour anymore, where some of those elevated events like a Riviera, like, Arnie's Place, etc., where they may have kind of taken centre stage, even a Players, for example, which of course he won. I think the Aussie Open and the Aussie PGA have maybe gone up in stature in Cam Smith's mind. So it's, obviously that's based on 0. But, it would be fascinating to know where they kind of sit amongst, his rankings now, because, as you say, he's a free agent on the market, kind of just working his way around the world and, playing good golf in Hong Kong and, just making birdies for fun, which was really pleasing to see. The putter looks good. Everything kind of looks good. And as you say, I think it sets himself up for a really good assault on the 2 weeks, or our two major events anyway. So
I think maybe even the most pleasing thing was his level of disappointment at the end of the tournament. Certainly wasn't content with where he finished in outright second. So that, I think, bodes well, to be honest. He even said, what's the quote here? Pretty poor over the weekend. I hung in there, plenty of positives. Definitely wasn't the nicest golf to be played over the last couple of days. Still lots to work on, with an outright second, 1 shot off the winner. So I think that's a really good attitude coming home for a big fortnight of golf here in Australia. So falls a shot behind Ben Campbell. I mentioned a bit of controversy. This was on the 16th hole. So it was a final group of 3. It was Smith, Campbell, and I'm going to absolutely butcher this name, but it was Thailand's Pachara Kongwatmai was the 3rd player in the group, Druids. He was actually leading by 1 with 3 holes to play. 261st ranked player in the world steps up to the 16th tee with a 1-stroke lead and absolutely blocks his tee shot right into thick trees. What ensued was a 15-minute delay, a rules controversy, what appeared to be some significant landscaping being done by Kongwatmai and his caddy in an attempt to free up his ball, and an increasingly frustrated Campbell and Smith as it relates specifically, it seems, to Rule 8 in the rules of golf. Course played as it found under Rule 8.1 specifically mentions that actions that are not allowed, players must not take any of these actions if they improve the conditions affecting the stroke. Move, bend, or break any growing or attached natural object, immovable obstruction, integral object, or boundary object, or tee marker for the teeing area when playing a ball from that teeing area. As I said, Kongwatmai and his caddy breaking branches, pulling away shrubbery. It was blatant. And both Campbell and Smith, fortunately, removed themselves from the situation after expressing their disappointment. Several rules officials called in. Kongwatmai didn't get his way and eventually fell away. But it was a pretty farcical ending to that tournament. Fortunately, it didn't rattle Ben Campbell, who walked away as a 1-stroke victor. But worth going back and having a look at the video, because we've been critical in the past of Patrick Reed subtly improving his life. There wasn't much subtle about what Kongwatmai and his caddy were doing with the tree branches. It was actually quite incredible, Dreads.
Yeah.
Just briefly, other Aussies playing at that tournament, Harrison Crowe in a tie for 8th. He continues a great start to his professional career. Douglas Klein, T30, Zach Murray and Scott Hend and Travis Smythe all in a tie for 42nd. Jed Morgan, T66, and Andrew Dote, T69. Long list of Australians that missed the cut, who we won't go into great detail on. That wraps up the Asian tour. Shall we go to the DP World Tour in Sun City, Druids, or will we go to Bermuda? Where would you like to go next? Choose your own adventure.
Go the DP, because there's not a great deal here, really. I mean, our best finish was 239 Scriv, but the field was very good. The field was an interesting one.
It was. So the Nedbank Golf Challenge, the Gary Player Country Club, Sun City in South Africa. I'm not sure if you caught much of Gary Player on the commentary, but continued to embarrass himself. There was some pretty poor opinions shared over the weekend by Gary. And I think we've probably reached a point in this tournament where Gary can become a visible figurehead without necessarily requiring time behind the microphone as part of the broadcast. Anywho, moving on, Max Homa was the winner here, taking home just short of €1 million for his troubles. Daniel Hillier, as you say, the best finishing Australasian in a tie for 33rd. Jason Scrivener, the best finishing Aussie in a tie for 39. But to your point, Drew, it's the field. And I just wanted to touch on this briefly because we saw, obviously, Max Homa winning the tournament. Justin Thomas travelled to South Africa alongside Max Homer. Justin Rose was there. Tommy Fleetwood was there. And I know that there are a variety of environmental factors. Yes, the DP World Tour is in a strategic alliance with the PGA Tour, and we here in Australia are only in a strategic alliance with the DP World Tour. So I understand our relative place in the food chain. And yes, I understand that when people come down to Australia and play, tax on earnings is a significant barrier to entry to attracting players down to Australia. So I understand all of these things. But when I'm comparing Homer, Thomas, Fleetwood, Rose to Patrick Rogers and Nick Hardy, that's the players we got coming off the PGA Tour to come in. Oh, sorry, Blocky. I forgot Blocky. Don't forget Blocky. Can't possibly forget Blocky. So we've got Patrick Rogers, Nick Hardy, and Michael Block compared to Justin Thomas, Max Homer, Justin Rose, Tommy Fleetwood. So it ruffles my feathers a little bit that, the greatest respect to Sun City in South Africa, that's the caliber of field you can attract to the Nedbank Golf Challenge. Yet we can't seem to attract a similar field to, down to Royal Queensland, down to Sydney, and even, down to some things in the Sandbelt. Nothing seemingly is bringing that caliber of player to Australia anytime soon.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to see, such big names, such big draw cards. I think there's two purposes, as I say, to these international players that come and play in big tournaments like this. And one is to sell tickets and two is to compete. I don't think Michael Block is going to do either of those. I'd be surprised if either of the others are really going to have a good nudge at any of the titles that they play in. You bring someone like a Max Homer or a Justin Thomas down, I guarantee you they'll absolutely sell tickets at least. I don't think anyone's going out to see Nick Hardy play golf. So I think there's a couple of trains of thoughts, or a couple of reasons there for me anyway. So yeah, a little frustrating to see players go out and play on DP World Tours in events, in locations that are probably far more difficult to get to than Queensland and New South Wales, I would suggest. So, yeah, a little frustrating. But they have the DP World Tour Championship coming up this weekend as well, Marshy. So I'm sure the Nedbank Golf Challenge was merely a stepping stone for a couple of players to get to that as well.
Certainly, and as I said, I acknowledge even schedule. We probably didn't talk about that. You've talked about, they're off to the race to Dubai this weekend, and we've got Tiger's Hero Challenge in the Bahamas that clashes with our events as well. But none of that gets signed off without the PGA Tour's knowledge. So the PGA Tour has an obligation to take a global view of the game as well. So I just think that there are things that, for as wonderful work as the tour is doing, and they've done an excellent job to create, as good a summer as we've seen in recent memory. But when you've got domestic taxes working against you, when you've got, the global headquarters of the game in terms of schedule working against you, we're doing it with our hands tied around our back at times. And I just would like to see a little bit more of a global view that sees players come down and play in one of the best golfing regions in the world to fans. Live Golf's a perfect example in Adelaide. 40, 50,000 people. They were hanging off the roof there. Like, the appetite is there. There just needs to be a couple of other parties come to the table to make that a reality.
And we will get to Live Golf very shortly. But while we're on the DP World Tour, let's DP World Tour adjacent. The final stage of the Q School is currently ongoing. Italy's Filippo Celli is leading at the minute. 6 rounds, if you don't mind, for the final stage of the Q School there in Spain, playing across 2 different courses. Currently, we have Sam Jones from New Zealand and Hayden Hopewell, of course, from WA here, currently inside the top 25 and ties at 8 under par. Filippo Celli is racing ahead at 19 under par. The other Aussies that are currently in the field, Hayden Barron, who's yet to tee off, he is at 6 under par. Got to get a couple of birdies on the card to jump into that top 25. Elvis Smiley at 4 under. Our mate Justin Warren, who is currently even par through 9 holes today, he's at 3 under alongside Connor McKinney. scrolling down, Matthias Sanchez yet to tee off, is at even par, has to make a big run today, as does James Marcassani, who's 2 over, and Andre Lauti as well. And unfortunately, the final Aussie in the field is Blake Windred, who retired at 2 under par after 2 rounds. So that is ongoing at the minute. That will continue running until the 15th of November, so a couple more days. But fingers crossed for those Aussies that are in with a sniff at the minute.
And just worth noting there, Drew, so 6 rounds, as you said, but a cut here after the 3rd round. So the projected cut line at the moment is at 4 under, which Elvis Smiley sits just inside. But those names you mentioned after, the likes of Warren, McKinney, Lauti, they do currently sit outside. So we need a strong showing from the Aussies to get themselves into the final 3 rounds. Top 25 and ties, securing their card for the DP World Tour next year. Let's go to Bermuda, Druids. Now, there's a couple of things here. This, I think, is great proof that in amongst the dirt there is often diamonds, because the Butterfield Bermuda Championship, as it relates to quality on the PGA Tour, is a shocker. It's one of these weekend fillers in what is the American fall. It's the downtime for the players who, that's why you see the likes of the players who've just spoken about head to South Africa to play on the DP World Tour. It's why you see a number of players coming to Australia. As we've mentioned, it is the time where players exercise their flexibility through their schedule, and those that need to will play these tournaments through the fall. It's part of the, I suppose, reform tour moving forward as it relates to elevated events and others. Now, the reason I say there are diamonds amongst the dirt is there's some fantastic stories here. And I want to start with the winner. So Camilo Villegas, a name who people who've followed the game for, 20, 30 years will understand that this was the man kind of back 05, 06 era. He had burst onto the scene, belted a ball, looked good doing it. He was really the full package. This is his first win, Drew, since 2014. 9-year drought. It's his 5th overall victory on the PGA Tour, but first in 9 years, as I mentioned. A fortnight ago, he was 223rd on the FedEx rankings. He was booked in to the second stage of Q School just to maintain his card, or the chance to maintain his card. In the last fortnight, he's gone T2, outright first, comfortably, mind you. I think he won by 3 shots today to be exempt on the PGA Tour through the back end of 2025. Now, this is a guy who's not only had a drought in playing, he's been in the wilderness many, many years on the Corn Ferry Tour as well. He's been through personal tragedy. He lost his daughter back in 2020. I think she was only 2.5 years of age. Tragic circumstances. And nobody would have begrudged him walking away from the game. So, yes, I don't put my hand up. I didn't watch a moment of the Butterfield Bermuda Championship, nor do I intend to moving forward. But when it presents opportunities for moments like that, it still has a place, certainly, on the calendar.
Yeah, absolutely right. He was so popular back in the day. I remember being a youngster and you'd go to the golf course and you'd muck around, and because we didn't really care in those days, you're mucking around and you're doing his little spider, reading of the greens, how he used to get down on the greens to read those.
Yes, reading the greens, the scorpion.
Used to be a bit of a thing, and he was almost he was kind of Ricky before Ricky. He dressed in the full orange and the full block colors, and he was a really cool cat. And it's just great to see him back in the winners' circle, and he's come back through the hard way via the Corn Ferry Tour, and to see him get a win is excellent. Take all your points about strength of field, etc. And I think people use these events as a bit of a whipping boy for some of these. Why do they get OWGR points and other events don't? But it's awesome to see guys like Camilo get a victory after all these years.
It's also great to see Adam Scott in form. He has his 5th top 10 finish, Druids, of the season to date, finishing in a tie for fifth, 5 strokes behind Viegas, and himself running into a bit of form before he heads back to Australia.
Yeah. He's looked like he was striking the ball pretty well. 4 under par today. Had him, in a share of fifth. I mean, again, the field wasn't particularly strong, but I think it was a good showing and kind of similar to Cameron Smith at this point is I think he's got eyes. He's got eyes for other events. And a T5 finish is nothing to sneeze at. I think, maybe some of the signs are looking good for Scotty because, he hit a little bit of form at the back end of the season. Going into the Open Championship, I think he was in decent form and some people thought he might play well. But he certainly seems to have found a little bit of a groove. Not back to the heyday of Adam Scott, but certainly seems to be playing better golf than what he was maybe 12 months ago.
Lucas Herbert, T30, Cam Percy, T72, the other two Aussies play the weekend there. Just briefly on Herbie, I think he's flying under the radar a little bit coming home. And I don't necessarily say that, but he hasn't stacked up, noticeable results of late, but he's hitting the ball well enough, I think, to certainly contend. And I just feel like, when you've got Smithy and you've got Leash and you've got Scotty coming home, you've got Minwoo coming back, you've got Moronk coming back to defend. Now you've got big shot Bob McIntyre, you've got Rogers and Hardy. Don't forget Blocky, can't forget Blocky, won't forget Blocky. I just kind of feel like Herbie is almost the forgotten man. And take his body of work over the last 12 to 18 months, it stacks up against a lot of Australian players playing overseas. So it's just one to look out for, these two big tournaments coming up. I think he's going to come with it because he also strikes me as the type of guy who would have a bit of a chip on his shoulder about that. Don't forget about me just because my Instagram's not as good as Minwoo's. I just kind of feel like there's a little bit of, I'm not feeding the algorithm as much as Minwoo, and I kind of get forgotten about it a little bit. So I'm very curious to see how he comes home because I think he's primed to play really well when he gets back to Australia.
I think you're right. He's another one who seems like the ball is coming out really nicely. I just had a quick look then. I think he's on the cusp of the top 50 in the world. So these couple of events will go a long way if he can perform well in getting him towards that elusive top 50 spot because we know everything that comes with that.
That rounds us out on the PGA Tour. Druids, just briefly on the LPGA because that is coming really to the pointy end of the season. It was a 4th victory of the year for Lilia Vu. Incredibly, really. I mean, she and Celine Boutier have won that many times on tour this season. The only difference being that 2 of Lilia Vu's have been majors, which certainly sets her apart. But they played the Pelican Golf Club in Florida. It was the Annika tournament. Lilia Vu eventually claiming, as I said, her 4th victory. But I say, and I bring this up because it's relevant as it relates to the race to the CME Global, which is their end of season championship. So top 60 moved through. And we've got a number of Aussies, including Steph Kyriakou, who snuck her way into the last tournament of the year, courtesy of a T5 finish at the Annika event. Big friend of this podcast. Great to see Steph in a bit of form and great to see her book her place in the last tournament of the year and the biggest purse of the year as it relates to the LPGA Tour. So Aussies competing in the final event of the year will be Minjee Lee is our highest ranked Aussie. She's 6th on the rankings. Hannah Green, Grace Kim moves through in what's been an outstanding season for Grace Kim on the LPGA Tour. Steph Kyriakou and Sarah Kemp. So that's your Aussies who will compete in the final tournament of the season as well. So good luck to those 5. I can say we're in with a fair chance based on form. Certainly based on the way that Minjee Lee's been hitting the ball this year, but awesome to see Steph Kyriakou sneak herself in there with the T5 finish at the Annika Druids.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she's playing good golf, and fingers crossed that continues into, what is a big big event next week. I think you said, is it their final event of this season is, hopefully we can see a few Aussies up the top end of the leaderboard, because all in all, it's been a pretty good season for our female players on the LPGA and more broadly, as we've discussed. But it'd be nice to see a few Aussie flags in the top half, or in the top few names of that leaderboard anyway.
And a few bank accounts topped up for that matter. Drew's just finally teased it before, but Live Golf returning in 2024. And why wouldn't it? I mean, honestly, it's a format and a league and a tour that we've obviously had our criticisms of in the past, but speaking through green and gold coloured glasses, it would be hard to see the Adelaide event this year as anything other than the most successful event Liv has run, period, full stop. So I'm not surprised. In fact, if there's any surprises that the announcement didn't come earlier, that it was returning to Australia.
Yeah, and returning to the Grange in South Australia, 26th to the 28th of April. I don't believe that it aligns with Gather Round this year for the AFL, which I think may have been a bit of a miscommunication in the first place, that it all kind of happened at once. So South Australia getting 2 bites at the cherries this time around. Looking at the article that Liv put out, generated nearly $65 million in direct expenditure in South Australia, and more than 43,000 visitor nights in Adelaide. So 77,000 people attending the event. Whether that number is accurate or not, I'm not entirely sure, but we had varying reports from on the ground last year. But there is no surprise, and there will be no surprise to see that the ticket sales, the prices of the tickets will go through the roof this year. I had a mate who paid $140 for 3 days. I reckon you'd probably be looking at $140 for 1 day now. But that'll be interesting to see when tickets come out on sale. I don't believe they have put a date on when the tickets will be there, but I guarantee that they'll be gone very, very quickly. So I guess it'll be another very well supported event in Adelaide, and I'm sure we'll see plenty more scenes and party scenes. And I'm just looking forward to who's going to headline this year at the DJ stage post event. That's what I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, certainly turned heads in the golfing world. I think, honestly, and to its credit, it was probably the event that made critics and skeptics of Live Golf sit up and pay attention. And that's as big a compliment as you could pay, not just the event, but I'd suggest the broader Australian golfing public who engaged in it, is that this is the event that really had people taking it seriously. So credit to the Grange for putting its hand up again. I know that there was portions of the membership that weren't thrilled, but you'd have to have your head in the sand to not realise the benefits that that club has reaped from being the one willing to put their hand up and host. And I'd suggest that they're off the back of the success of that event last year would have been a number of clubs getting in contact with Greg Norman, offering their services. So it's a nod to the Grange that it's going back there, because I'm sure there were other offers.
I agree.
Plain and simple.
Yeah.
That'll do us, I think, Drew. It's busy week. Fantastic start so far of the season, and we really ramp up. Obviously, the Vic PGA is a prestigious event, and it leads into an enormous fortnight with the PGA and the Australian Open as well. So plenty coming down the pipeline. I can confirm there is an official request in for Big Shot Bob McIntyre. So that's been placed. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
He's not going anywhere. He's arriving prior to the PGA. He's certainly not going back to Scotland after and flying back. We've got him for a captive audience for a fortnight in Australia. I'd like to think somewhere in that fortnight we'll find a half an hour window to get Big Shot Bob McIntyre on this podcast. I have, in my conversations with the tour, extended that invitation to anyone, Australian or otherwise, returning to or travelling to Australia to compete in those two events.
Yeah.
So we'll see where we land. We've cast a wide net. We'll see where we land in terms of players that do appear on the podcast. We're also tossing around the idea of maybe throwing up some daily shows. So we'll see how we go with that. It's certainly one that we've
looked at in the past. We might have to overcome some technical difficulties in order to do so. But
Yes.
we will explore that. Our two biggest tournaments of the year are certainly worthy of that. So long and the short of it is plenty of content coming down the pipeline in the next 3 weeks. Fantastic to have our great friends at Cobra Puma Golf on board as presenting partner. They'll be forefront as it relates to a big Aussie Summer of Golf here in the 19th Tee podcast. Great to have them on board. Jump online at the 19th podcast on the Instagram. Send us an email, the 19th podcast at gmail.com with your thoughts, feedback, criticism, praise. We'll take it all. Just love the engagement. Drew, that's what we do us, I think.
Yes.
For another week. It's been a pleasure to have your company, my friend, as always. And we will be back with a look back at the Vic PGA from Moonlinks.